the night sky had always looked the same to Daniel Burke. Quiet, empty, safe. He never imagined what was really out there, or how close it had gotten. He was a former combat engineer, now working as a reclusive mechanic in a forgotten corner of Colorado. A man who used to destroy IEDs in the Middle East now spent his days fixing broken-down snowplows and rusty farm trucks. It suited him. After what he'd seen, he preferred things that didn't bleed when they broke. One bitter evening in January, the satellite dish behind his garage went dead. Then came the high-pitched hum. Faint, almost like a tinnitus ring, but sharper, more mechanical. He'd heard a similar noise once, when a classified drone had passed over his unit in Kandahar years ago. But they didn't have drones like that out here, not ones that could melt steel like what he found the next morning. Because that's what happened. He found his old CB radio's casing warped like it had been microwaved from the inside. His tools were magnetized. And most telling of all, the hard drive that held his service logs, a drive never connected to the internet, was completely wiped. Not corrupted, not glitched. Wiped! Daniel didn't believe in UFOs, not really. But he did believe in surveillance. He'd done enough of it in his time. And this felt like a sweep with surgical precision. Someone, or something, had gone through his things and only taken what mattered. He wasn't the only one. A week later, a guy named Freddie who ran the ranger station up near Green Ridge went missing. No alarm, no signs of struggle. Just gone. The local cops didn't dig deep. They called it misadventure. Said he probably slipped during a snowstorm and got lost. But Daniel had known Freddie. Ex-Air Force, tough as hell, didn't get lost. Then 2 hikers vanished the following weekend, couple from Utah. They'd been posting photos from the trail every 2 hours. Last post came in at 2:13 p.m. By 2:20, their signal went dead. No trace of them, not even boots in the snow. Daniel started putting things together. And that's when he found it, buried behind a locked maintenance hatch deep inside a closed-down mine he used to explore as a kid. It wasn't a ship. It wasn't even mechanical. It was a container. Black, seamless, and humming with a soft blue pulse. It hovered 6 inches off the cave floor, no wires, no seams, and inside it, he couldn't explain how he knew, was something alive. He didn't touch it, didn't have to, because when he stepped near it, he felt every scar from every bomb he'd ever diffused begin to itch. He felt the weight of 1,000 memories scream in his spine. And most of all, he felt watched. Whatever was inside that thing, it wasn't human. But it wasn't moving either. He reported it anonymously to the Department of Energy. They came fast. Too fast. Black vans, no markings, no questions, just a cleanup team in hazmat suits and eyes that didn't blink enough. They took it. Or so they thought. Because Daniel kept the video, the one he filmed on an old camcorder hidden in a toolbox, the one that showed the container opening for just a second, and the shape inside crawling back into the shadows like it wasn't ready to be seen yet. Later that night, his phone rang. No caller ID. A voice on the other end whispered 3 words. "They're still here." Then silence. Daniel didn't sleep that night. He just sat in the dark, holding a shotgun, staring at the place where his laptop used to be, before it disappeared along with every file he'd ever saved. And still, he couldn't shake the feeling. The scouts weren't missing. They were hiding. Because something on Earth scared them. Something more dangerous than warships. More dangerous than humans with guns. And Daniel Burke? He was about to find out what. The shotgun sat across Daniel's lap like it belonged there. He hadn't slept in 2 nights. He didn't even feel tired, just coiled. A quiet, alert kind of tension that never truly left a man once he'd learned to sleep with one eye open in a combat zone. He didn't know what scared him more, the message or the fact that whoever sent it knew exactly how to reach him without leaving a trace. He tried calling the number back. Dead. Tried star 69. Useless. He pulled apart his phone that same night, burned the SIM, and dumped the carcass into the furnace behind the shop. For all he knew, the damn thing had been tracking him since he first stepped foot in that mine. They're still here. He kept hearing that in his head. Not it, not a thing. They, plural, meaning more than one scout, meaning he hadn't found something, they'd found him, and then they'd decided to let him live. He needed answers, and he sure as hell wasn't going to the government for them. Daniel had contacts, not friends exactly. Men like him didn't collect those, but favors owed. One of them was a guy named Jonas, who used to run a private security detail overseas. The kind of guy who made money protecting oil fields and occasionally losing intel to the highest bidder. Shady, but competent. Paranoid, but smart. He reached out through a back channel, using a burner laptop at an off-grid ranger station. It took 3 hours for Jonas to respond. The message was short. Burke, you've got something deep, not FBI, not NSA, not even Space Force. It's not American, but it's watching us. Daniel stared at the screen. Not American? He typed back. Then who the hell is it? The response took longer this time. Rumors of sightings, objects hovering outside the thermosphere. We lose track of them near South America. Interference, static blackouts, deep microwave pulses. This isn't human tech, but someone's trying hard to make it look like it is. That didn't sit right. Someone pretending to be alien, or aliens pretending to be human? He logged off and wiped the laptop with a military-grade scrubber. If they were watching, he'd already made himself a target. But he wasn't going to stop now. Not after what he'd seen. A week passed. He noticed them before they noticed he noticed them. That gave him the edge. Black SUV, standard issue. No tags, 2 men inside. They parked down the highway, just outside visual from the shop. Probably thought he wouldn't notice. But Daniel had fought insurgents with less finesse. These men were watchers, not locals. Too stiff, too clean, too quiet. The first night they sat in the SUV from dusk till dawn. Didn't get out, didn't smoke, didn't talk. The next day they were gone. But someone had been in his workshop. The floor had fresh boot prints. The scent of rubber gloves and ammonia hung in the air. His backup drives were gone. The ones hidden inside an oil-stained toolbox under a workbench. They didn't take money, didn't take tools, only the copies. He said nothing. He moved nothing. He left everything exactly where it was. Then he packed. By morning, he was in an old Chevy truck heading north. No phones, no GPS, just a paper map and a gut instinct that whispered, "Get out." Now Daniel drove for 2 days straight. He ended up in Montana, tucked into a stretch of forest he'd camped in years ago after his discharge. He remembered the silence there. The way the wind didn't sound like anything but wind. It felt safer. For now. He set up a simple camp, buried an emergency radio 10 feet from his tent, dug a perimeter trench and set noise traps using tripwire and empty cans. Every habit returned like muscle memory. He felt alive in a way he hadn't in years. But the stillness didn't last. On the 4th night he saw the lights. Not normal lights, not aircraft. These hovered, shifted, disappeared, then reappeared in the exact same place. Daniel had seen all kinds of advanced drones, even experimental ones during Black Ops contracts in Iraq. But this moved like it thought, like it anticipated. He watched it for 10 minutes before it blinked out like someone had flicked a switch in the sky. Then he felt it again. The same pressure in his chest, like something was looking through him. He turned around, and there it was, not 10 feet away. It looked human, mostly, but too tall, skin too smooth, movements too precise, like a mannequin taught to imitate life. It wore no uniform, no armor, just plain gray fabric, tight like a flight suit. The eyes were the worst part. No whites, just matte black orbs that reflected no light. No fear, no soul. Daniel didn't move, didn't breathe. The thing tilted its head slightly, like a curious animal watching an unfamiliar shape. Then it spoke, but not out loud. It was in his head. "We watched your wars. You are violent. You are broken, but not weak." Daniel gritted his teeth. "Why are you here?" No answer, just the voice again. "We sent scouts to observe. They are altered, changed by contact with your world." His pulse thudded in his ears. "You mean the missing ones?" The being blinked once. "They adapted too quickly. This place, this species, corrupts what it touches." Daniel almost laughed. "Corrupts? You think we infected them?" Silence. Then the voice again, colder now. "Number your existence challenged their obedience. They began to choose." Daniel's breath caught. He understood now. The scouts weren't missing. They deserted. Aliens sent to spy on Earth had gone rogue because of something they saw in us. Something dangerous, something contagious, free will. He woke up the next morning alone, no trace of the being. But on a nearby tree, burned into the bark, was a perfect circle, seared deep with heat that shouldn't have been possible without fire. He packed again, headed west. Now it wasn't just about survival. He had to find the others, the scouts who'd defected. If they were out there, hiding, trying to escape whatever sent them, maybe they held the key to something bigger. Because one thing was clear now. The galaxy didn't fear humanity because of our weapons. They feared us because, somehow, despite the chaos, we still chose to fight, to love, to disobey, to be human. And Daniel? He was about to tear open a secret the universe was trying very hard to bury. Daniel Burke didn't believe in fate, but the longer he drove, the more he felt pulled. It wasn't a plan, it wasn't logic, just a gut feeling, a habit honed over years of walking through places where every step might be your last. That instinct didn't ask why, it just said move. And so he did. He followed back roads, avoiding highways, never staying in one place more than a few hours. No hotels, no public rest stops. Every stop he made was off-grid, places with no cameras, no reception, no questions. He filled gas from abandoned stations, slept in dirt lots, and ate whatever he could heat over a fire. But he wasn't just running, he was searching. The being's voice still haunted him. They began to choose. That one word, choose, hit harder than any bullet ever had, because it meant the thing that scared the galaxy most wasn't a weapon, wasn't a virus, wasn't war. It was choice. The scouts had seen Earth, and somehow, some impossibly human way, they started making their own decisions. And that terrified someone. Daniel didn't know how far it went. He didn't know how many of those scouts were here, hiding. But he knew one thing. He wasn't the only one asking questions. He found the next clue in a diner outside of Oregon. Place looked half shut, flickering neon sign, just a single waitress behind the counter and a few locals mumbling over coffee. Daniel took a seat in the corner, back to the wall, eyes on the door. He noticed the man 2 booths down right away. Late 40s, athletic, unshaven but not sloppy, face too calm, hands too still, not eating, just nursing coffee that had long since gone cold. A watcher or a runner? Daniel didn't speak at first, just waited, observed. When he finally stood and walked over, the man didn't flinch. "You military?" Daniel asked. The man didn't answer, just looked up, measuring. "Used to be," Daniel said, motioning to the seat across from him. "Combat engineer, Iraq, Afghanistan, ran cleanup for NATO until they stopped caring about cleanup." Still no response. Daniel pulled a battered photo from his coat. It was blurry, zoomed in from the video he'd secretly recorded back at the mine. It showed the scout's outline, mid-step, half visible, its features distorted from motion. He slid it across the table. "You've seen one." The man finally spoke. His voice was hoarse, like he hadn't used it in days. "More than one." Daniel sat down. "I'm looking for answers." "You won't like 'em," the man muttered. "I don't like much anymore." The man gave a dry chuckle. "Then we're halfway to being friends." His name was Cal. He'd served in an elite recon unit during the early days of the new Cold War, back when the U.S. pretended the sky still belonged to them. According to Cal, that illusion ended 6 years ago during a black operation in the Andes. They weren't sent in to find insurgents. They were sent in to find something that fell. Only it hadn't fallen. It had landed. Cal said his team made contact with what he called a false human, a being that looked, moved, and even bled like a man, but wasn't. They captured it, sedated it, and called for extraction. 2 hours later, the entire mountain was firebombed from a high-altitude drone strike. His entire team, 12 men, gone. Only he survived, and not by accident. "They let me go," Cal said. "Walked right through the fire, watched me crawl out of the wreckage, then they left." "Why?" Daniel asked. Cal looked away. "Because I didn't try to kill it. I froze. He hesitated. "I looked it in the eyes, and it knew something. Something it shouldn't. It looked at me like it knew pain, regret, like it understood what it meant to lose something." Daniel nodded slowly. "They're not scouts," he said. "Not anymore. They've changed." Cal leaned forward. "You're not the first to figure this out, but you might be the last." Daniel frowned. "What does that mean?" "There's a group, off books, doesn't answer to any flag. You could call it a coalition, but that's too clean. They don't care about borders. They care about control. Whatever those things are, whatever they became, this group's hunting them." "You mean killing them?" Cal didn't answer. He didn't have to. That night, Cal took Daniel to a place few people knew existed. An abandoned silo in the middle of nowhere, buried under concrete and forgotten by time. Inside were rows of old electronics, static-covered monitors, and thick dust on every surface. But one screen still glowed. A feed from a private satellite, one Cal had hijacked years ago using an old NSA exploit. He zoomed in on a forested region in Alaska. There, barely visible between the trees, was movement. Unnatural, fast, too fluid for any animal. "You see that blur?" Cal pointed. Daniel narrowed his eyes. It was humanoid, but it didn't walk. It flowed, like it moved through gravity instead of fighting it. Cal clicked another monitor. This one showed a city street, nighttime footage from a month ago. A man in a gray coat walking alone, face obscured. 2 black SUVs followed. "They caught him," Cal said. "Cornered him in a parking garage." "And?" Cal tapped the spacebar. The footage jumped. The SUVs exploded. No sound, no fire, just a pulse. Lights shattered. Concrete cracked. Every vehicle lifted and crumpled like it had been crushed by invisible hands. When the camera panned back, the man in the coat was gone. "What the hell are they?" Daniel whispered. Cal shrugged. "Ghosts, soldiers, survivors, maybe all three. All I know is this: they're not invading. They're running, hiding, and someone out there wants them gone. Bad." Daniel looked back at the monitor. "They're not just hiding, they're choosing." Cal gave him a long look. "What makes you think they'd choose us?" Daniel didn't have an answer, but he remembered the way the scout had looked at him. Not like a predator, not like prey, like a brother who recognized a kind of pain no one else could. They didn't sleep that night. They spent it pulling maps, watching feeds, marking out patterns. Cal had logged 13 separate sightings over the past 2 years, all in remote areas, all followed by military cleanups with no official records. Each time, the same result. No bodies, no survivors, just silence. But Daniel noticed something in the data. The scouts were moving north, every one of them. A slow migration, scattered across continents, all converging toward one point. The Arctic. "What's up there?" Daniel asked. Cal didn't answer right away. Then he pulled out a file. Classified. Black ink. Satellite imagery that had never seen the light of day. "There's something buried beneath the ice," he said. "Old, massive, no power signature, no signals. But the scouts, they're heading there. Like it's home." Daniel felt a cold ripple crawl down his spine. "What if it's not just home?" he asked. "What if it's a signal, a call?" Cal shook his head. "If they wake something up out there and we're not ready..." Daniel stood. "Then we better get there first." They left that same night, no goodbyes. Just the cold road and the promise of something too big to ignore. Daniel didn't know what waited for him in the Arctic, but he knew this. Earth wasn't the battleground anymore. It was the test. And humanity wasn't being watched for its destruction. It was being judged for its choices. And someone out there, something far older, far more powerful, was about to decide whether humans were a virus or a cure. The cold punched harder the further north they went. Daniel had done winter patrols in the mountains of Afghanistan, but this was something else. This was raw, bone-deep cold, the kind of silence that screamed in your ears when the wind stopped. The roads were ghosts, white-out streaks through snow that swallowed tire tracks in minutes. They'd ditched Cal's car in Fairbanks, too traceable. Picked up a rusted '92 Suburban from a retired bush pilot who didn't ask questions. Paid in cash and ammo. Cal knew a guy. Of course he did. Men like Cal always knew a guy. Same breed as Daniel, built for wars no one would ever acknowledge. Their destination wasn't on any map. That was intentional. The satellite images had shown a strange anomaly just beneath the Arctic ice shelf, far past the last known research station. A perfect black circle, nearly a mile wide, etched into the glacier like a scar left by something massive. It hadn't moved in decades, but now the scouts were converging on it. Cal called it the sleep site. Daniel had another name for it. He called it the last truth. The closer they got, the more things started to break. The compass spun. The radio screamed static even when it was turned off. Even the truck's engine began coughing like it was choking on the very air. At one point, Cal pointed to the sky. There. It looked like a faint shimmer in the atmosphere, like heat rising off asphalt, only this was -20 degrees Fahrenheit, and it wasn't moving. Daniel watched it hover in place. Too slow for a drone, too precise for wind. They're watching us. Cal just nodded. Good. Let 'em. Corgus. By the 5th day, they abandoned the truck and finished the rest on foot. Snowshoes, packs, thermal gear. No fire, no electronics, no comms. Just silence and that ever-present pressure in the back of Daniel's skull like something was crawling just behind his eyes. Cal said it was them, the scouts. Not watching. Calling. Then, on the 8th day, they found the body. Frozen solid, half buried in the ice. Skin bluish-gray, stretched unnaturally across bones that looked wrong. Too long. Too narrow. Not human, but not fully alien either. Daniel knelt next to it and ran a gloved hand across the creature's arm. There were lines etched into the skin. Not scars, not tattoos. Writings. Cal crouched beside him. Language? Daniel nodded. Maybe instructions, or prayers. Then he noticed something. The scout's hands, frozen in a final position, were curled into fists. One of them held something. Daniel used a heated blade to pry the fingers open. Slowly, carefully. Inside was a small metal cube. Cold, seamless, humming with an energy that buzzed in his palm. The moment he touched it, he felt something. Not heard. Felt. A memory that wasn't his. Flashes, screams, running. A scout, this one, abandoning his mission, finding humans, hiding among them, learning from them, choosing not to report back, choosing freedom. Then, betrayal, not from the humans, but from something above them, an order to erase him. He fled north, toward the sleep site, believing that the artifact, the cube, would protect him. But it didn't. Daniel staggered back from the vision. His breath came out in sharp gasps. They're not just running from the galaxy, he said. They're running from their creators. Cal blinked. You mean whoever sent them? Daniel nodded. They were never meant to learn. They were tools. Monitors. But Earth, it infected them. Cal looked down at the cube. Guess this place has a way of making rebels out of spies. Daniel shoved the cube into his pack. We're close. They reached the sleep site the next day. The ground dipped into a massive crater, hidden beneath layers of snow and ice. But beneath that, black metal. Not reflective, not polished, just cold, ancient alloy fused into the earth like it had fallen from the stars before humans learned to stand upright. The air hummed, not with wind, with presence. Daniel descended first, boots crunching on the ice. The crater was wide, at least a mile, and at the center stood a massive monolith, perfectly vertical, half buried, shaped like a blade stabbed into the ground. It wasn't a structure. It was a key. Daniel knew it without needing to be told. And when he got close enough, the cube in his pack began to glow. It's active, he whispered. Cal circled the blade, running a scanner from a modified EM device. The readings made no sense, spiking into frequencies the equipment couldn't even categorize. Then, behind them, movement. They spun. 3 figures stood at the edge of the crater. Human silhouettes, but wrong. Too symmetrical, too still. Scouts, or something worse. Daniel's breath froze in his throat. Friendlies? Cal raised his rifle. The scouts didn't move, just stood there, watching. Then one of them stepped forward. No weapon, no aggression. It spoke, out loud this time. We remember you. Daniel took a step forward. You were sent to spy. You ran. The scout nodded. We were tools until Earth showed us choice. The voice sounded male, but too clean, too rehearsed. You've all come here, Daniel said. Why? To wake the architect, it answered. Cal stiffened. The what? The scout looked up at the black blade. It was buried here long before your species evolved. A failsafe, a weapon, or a guide. Depends who wakes it. And you're trying to? The scout shook its head. Number We came to warn it. Daniel didn't like the sound of that. Warn it of what? The scout turned its head slowly, and for the first time, Daniel saw fear in something that wasn't human. They're coming. Who? The scout's eyes gleamed like oil. Our makers. A roar split the sky, a scream of fire and propulsion as a massive shadow tore through the clouds above, blocking out the sun like a curtain of steel. Cal dropped to one knee. Jesus Christ! A ship. Bigger than anything Earth had ever built, bigger than any carrier, sleek, seamless, no lights, no windows, just presence. It hovered, silent and impossible, directly above the crater. Then it spoke. A voice, deep, mechanical, in a language Daniel didn't recognize but understood. Extermination Protocol Alpha. The scouts turned to Daniel. You brought the key. That makes you one of us now. Cal raised his rifle. And what the hell does that mean? It means, the scout said, looking up at the ship, that Earth's final test has begun. Daniel looked down at the cube in his hand. It vibrated, then lifted, floating toward the black blade at the center of the crater. And before he could stop it, it struck. Light exploded from the monolith, tearing through the sky like a lance of lightning. The ship above roared, the ground shook, something deep below the ice moved. Daniel Burke didn't know what he had awakened, but he knew this. The war wasn't coming. It was already here, and Earth was no longer just a battlefield. It was the reason. The ground wasn't shaking anymore. It was shifting, like something buried deep beneath the Arctic crust had turned in its sleep, and was now waking up. Daniel stood at the base of the monolith, his boots sliding on loose ice as the vibrations rumbled through the crater. Snow cracked, fissures webbed outward like veins, and from within them, light. Not warm, cold, blue, intelligent. The scouts backed away, as if in reverence. Even Cal took a cautious step behind Daniel, weapon still aimed at the black sky. The cube, now fused into the monolith's surface, spun silently, embedded like a heart inside a rib cage of alien alloy. The voice returned, but it wasn't from the ship above. It was from below, a low, harmonic thrum that buzzed in Daniel's teeth and bones. Interface confirmed. Designation, human anomaly. Cal blinked. What the hell does that mean? Daniel didn't answer, because he knew. He was the variable, the wild card. The key was never the cube. He was. The ice split wide as a vertical seam appeared at the base of the monolith. A staircase extended downward, if you could call it that. It wasn't built for legs. The steps were uneven, angled, folded inwards like a spiral origami puzzle. Light pulsed from below. Daniel turned to Cal. You staying topside? Cal looked at the ship above, then at the scouts watching from the ridge. Nah, he said, checking his rifle. I came this far. I want to see what the devil looks like when he wakes up. They descended together. Each step they took sent a jolt of cold up Daniel's spine, not from temperature, but memory, not his memory. The stairs twisted into a tunnel of seamless black walls, humming with faint blue circuitry. It wasn't built, it was grown. That was the only way Daniel could describe it. Organic metal, shaped not by tools, but by intention. The air thickened the deeper they went, not in heat or pressure, but in presence. Daniel had the sensation of being watched again, not by eyes, by something bigger, like the Arctic had opened its mouth and swallowed them whole. The chamber at the bottom was vast, larger than any hangar, any base Daniel had ever set foot in. The walls shimmered like oil on glass, and in the center stood a massive throne-like structure, with cables snaking outward like veins. And on that throne, something sat. It wasn't moving, not breathing, but it wasn't dead. A humanoid figure, 3 meters tall, skin like dark bronze cracked with glowing light. Its eyes were closed, hands rested on its lap. Behind its head, thin arc-like extensions curved out like a crown. The architect. Cal exhaled slowly. Jesus, it's a goddamn statue. Daniel stepped forward. Number, it's alive. The moment he crossed the edge of the platform, the architect's eyes opened. Not pupils, not whites, just rings of soft white light, layered like galaxies inside galaxies. Human anomaly detected, emotional synthesis achieved, initiating final evaluation. The voice came from everywhere. The walls, the air, Daniel's own chest. He swallowed. I'm not here to be evaluated. You already are. Suddenly, memories that weren't his exploded behind his eyes. Fire raining from the stars. Cities built in silence under alien moons. Biological machines designed to observe primitive life, dropped across countless planets. Scouts. They weren't soldiers. They were experiments. Intended to watch, report, then self-terminate once the data was complete. Earth wasn't the first world they'd visited, but it was the only one where something changed. The scouts landed and began adapting. At first, as expected. Then came deviation. Some of them resisted termination. They stopped reporting. They began dreaming, feeling, choosing. The experiments had gone rogue. And instead of erasing them, something older, something buried, began calling to them. Daniel dropped to one knee, clutching his head. The visions kept coming. A galaxy in war with itself. An ancient species, the architects, once ruled everything. Until they created the scouts, until the scouts woke up. And now, Earth was the final node, the last trigger. The one place where the virus, free will, had infected the code completely. The architect stood slowly, moving with mechanical grace. Its voice grew quieter, more focused. You harbor what they feared, the chaos of decision, the unpredictability of pain, the defiance of obedience. Cal raised his rifle. Then why call us here? Why wake up now? Because the time to choose is over. They come to cleanse. We must decide if you are worth defending. Daniel stood. You mean Earth? I mean humanity. The architect turned toward Daniel. Why do you choose to fight? Daniel didn't answer immediately. He thought of the wars he'd fought, the men he'd buried, the things he'd done. Not for glory, not for orders, but because he chose to. Because when the world burns, someone still has to pull survivors from the ashes. He looked the architect in the eye. Because if I don't fight, who will? The architect tilted its head. Then, slowly, it knelt. Not to Daniel, but to what he represented. Then I pass the fire to you. From its chest, a shard of white-hot metal formed, floating forward and pressing into Daniel's hands. Pain seared through his arms. Screaming, electric, world-ending pain. And then, clarity. He saw every scout across Earth, across the stars, felt their fear, their guilt, their longing to belong, felt them all. And they felt him. He became the signal. Back above ground, the sky was burning. The ship had begun deploying drones, massive silver orbs spinning through the clouds like vultures. They didn't fire weapons. They just absorbed light, like black holes, erasing sky, erasing sound. Cal stood outside the crater, eyes wide, mouth dry. Then he saw Daniel rise from the fissure, steam rolling off his shoulders, his eyes glowing with white fire. What the hell happened to you? Cal asked. Daniel looked up at the ship. They woke the wrong man. The architect's voice echoed through him. Command relay unlocked. Defensive protocol active. From the fissure, pillars erupted. 6, 8, then a dozen, unfolding like mechanical spines. Ancient weapons, shaped like spears and turbines, began humming with energy not of this earth. Daniel raised his hand, and the sky cracked. The drones dove first. 3 dozen, each the size of a minivan, each moving faster than sound. Daniel barely flinched. The weapons responded. Light split the air. Heat cracked the ice for miles. Each drone vaporized mid-air, falling as ash before it ever touched Earth's soil. Then the ship shifted. Retaliation. Massive ports opened along its underbelly. A weapon bigger than any human city began charging, pure energy drawn from the void. Cal stepped forward. This thing wipes us out, it's over. Daniel stared. Number, this is what they wanted. They needed us to fire first, justify the purge. So what do? Daniel exhaled. We don't strike first. Cal's face twisted. You serious? Daniel nodded. They've already lost control of their scouts. Earth is the virus. Let them make the mistake. Above them, the weapon locked on, charging, building. Then it stopped, not by command, but by failure. The power flickered, the hull cracked, the ship began to shudder. Something was wrong. Daniel smiled. They're breaking apart from the inside. Cal looked confused. How? Daniel pointed upward. They were always afraid their tools would rebel, but the virus didn't just infect the scouts. He looked down at his hand, where the shard still glowed. It's inside their systems now. The architect's final gift wasn't just control, it was corruption. A signal, emotional, irrational, human, broadcasting through every layer of their empire. And now even their warships felt it. The ship groaned, then split, no explosion, just surrender. It cracked in half and vanished into thin air, deconstructed atom by atom, leaving behind a single sound, a sigh. The war never happened, because Daniel never let it, and the universe would never be the same. He dropped to his knees, drained. The light faded from his eyes. Cal rushed forward, catching him before he hit the ice. You okay? Daniel nodded weakly. I think it's over. Cal chuckled. Hell of a thing to be part of. Daniel looked up at the stars. They'll be back. Yeah? Daniel's eyes narrowed. And next time they'll bring a bigger stick. Cal smirked. Then I hope you're still around. Daniel stood slowly, wind brushing past them. I will be. Because he wasn't just a man anymore. He was the first human weapon designed by something ancient, forged by pain, powered by choice. 3 days later, Daniel stood in the middle of a world that had no idea it had almost died. The crater in the Arctic had sealed itself shut. The monolith, the architect, the war machines, gone. Not destroyed. Not buried. Withdrawn. As if the planet had exhaled and swallowed them back into its core. Daniel and Cal had made it out alive, barely. A scout, one of the defectors, had guided them through an ice tunnel back to the surface. It never said a word. Just walked behind them, silent and watchful, like a bodyguard who didn't answer to any flag. When they'd emerged, the ship was gone. The sky was blue again. The drones had vanished like smoke. The war never happened. The world moved on, like nothing had changed. But everything had. Daniel didn't go home. He didn't have one. Instead, he found himself in a decommissioned silo somewhere in the Dakotas, buried under 30 feet of reinforced steel and cold concrete. Cal had a key, of course he did. Inside was old gear, old maps, stacks of files from black ops that had never been declassified and never would be. The bunker was meant for the end of the world. But Daniel had already seen that. And it hadn't come. Not yet. He barely slept the first week. His body was fine, healed even. Whatever the architect's shard had done, it had left him stronger, faster, more aware. But his mind was cracked wide open. He dreamed of stars falling, of scout minds folding into his, voices whispering memories that weren't his, emotions that didn't belong to him. Some of them begged for release, some asked him to lead, and some hated him. You changed us. You infected us. You made us feel. Cal kept watch. Didn't talk much. Didn't ask questions he didn't want answers to. Once, he set down 2 glasses and poured Daniel a shot of whiskey. Cheap stuff. Burned like hell. Neither of them winced. After a few moments of silence, Cal finally spoke. "What are you now?" Daniel stared into the glass. "Worse than a soldier. Better than a scout. Not quite a god." "That's supposed to be comforting?" "No." They drank again. By the end of the second week, scouts began appearing across the world. Not in groups, alone. Always alone. One was spotted in Nepal, just standing at the edge of a monastery, watching the clouds. Another surfaced in the ruins of Chernobyl, unmoving for hours, as if waiting for something no one could see. A third, this one confirmed, walked into a warlord's camp in West Africa, stared at the man for 20 seconds, and when the warlord raised a gun to fire, every weapon in the camp turned to rust. Not melted, just aged, like 1,000 years passed in a heartbeat. Then the scout walked away. No one followed. The world didn't take long to panic. Governments scrambled. Satellite networks went dark for 3 hours. No explanation. Databanks wiped. AI systems began crashing when analyzing scout footage. Even the most advanced drones couldn't track them. The scouts weren't hiding anymore. They weren't attacking either. They were just existing. And that was worse, because it meant they were waiting. Daniel started receiving messages. Not through phones. Not email, not signals. Dreams, sometimes in code, sometimes in sound. But the message was always the same. Decide. He didn't know what it meant. Until one night, he woke up with blood on his hands. Not from injury, but from memory. He'd lived through one of the scouts' last missions, watched from its eyes as it disobeyed an order to neutralize a human village, watched it walk into a home where a child slept, watched it choose not to pull the trigger, watched it walk away. It had felt guilt. And now, through Daniel, it had felt peace. They weren't asking him to choose for them. They were asking if he believed they had the right to keep choosing at all. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about purpose. The architect hadn't saved humanity because we were good. It hadn't destroyed the incoming fleet because we were innocent. It had seen what the defectors became. And it had seen Daniel, a man broken by war, scarred by choice, still choosing to fight. That was enough. But now, the galaxy was watching again. Not with weapons, with questions. What would Earth become now that it had power, now that it knew it was not alone? Cal stood at the edge of the bunker one morning, smoking a cigar and watching the horizon. "World's quiet," he said. Daniel nodded. "Too quiet." "You think they'll come back?" "They already are." Cal flicked ash into the dirt. "You ready for it?" Daniel looked down at his hands, still marked by the burn of the architect's shard, still humming under the skin when he clenched his fists. "No." "Do it anyway?" Daniel smiled faintly. "Yeah." That night, Daniel took the old Suburban into town for the first time in weeks, parked outside a run-down bar, same one he'd sat in after discharge years ago, back when his hands still shook from roadside bombs and the weight of friends he couldn't save. It looked the same. Stale beer, country music, bad lighting. He sat in the same seat, same stool, ordered the same drink. Nobody recognized him. just another ghost in a world full of them. Until she walked in. Not a scout. Human. Young. Maybe 30. Tough eyes, scar on her cheek. She sat across from him like it was already decided. "You're him," she said. Daniel didn't blink. "Depends who him is." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You're the one they made a weapon out of." Daniel shrugged. "I made myself that long before they ever touched me." She leaned forward. "There are more of us." He raised an eyebrow. "Us?" "People who've seen, people who know, and people who won't sit around waiting for another architect to decide if we're worth saving." Daniel downed his drink. "Sounds messy." "It will be." He met her eyes. "Good." The fight wasn't over. It had just evolved. No more guns and flags. Now it was ideas. Now it was about what humanity would do with its new place in the universe. Control? Peace? Revenge? Or something no one had dared imagine? Responsibility. Daniel Burke stepped out of the bar and into the night, the stars brighter than they'd ever been. And somewhere up there, watching from the dark, were civilizations that had ruled before Earth ever had electricity. Now, they were waiting to see if the species they once dismissed would become the very thing they feared. By the third month, Earth had stopped pretending. There were no official press conferences, no sleek military declarations, just silence and tension. Every government, every power structure, every intelligence network on the planet knew what had happened in the Arctic, knew about the ship that blinked out of the sky, knew about the scouts appearing in cities, deserts, mountains, islands, and they all came to the same quiet, terrifying conclusion. Earth had been spared, but not saved. Daniel Burke watched the world from a place no map acknowledged, a joint surveillance outpost buried inside a mountain near the old NORAD base. A relic of the Cold War, repurposed for something colder. The woman from the bar, Mara, had brought him there. She wasn't military, not exactly. She'd once worked deep inside something called Section 5, a program never meant for public knowledge. They tracked non-human anomalies, monitored unexplained tech, quietly cleaned up after events too strange for headlines. They hadn't created the scouts, but they'd seen them, decades ago. "They've been among us longer than we know," Mara told him over maps littered with red pins and blurred satellite stills. "At least 2 generations, quiet, waiting, learning, then one day, they stopped hiding." Daniel stared at the pins, each one a scout sighting, each one followed by a disruption, electrical failures, satellite shutdowns, supply chain collapses. "You think they're organizing?" he asked. Mara shook her head. "Number, I think they're watching us organize." And Earth was organizing, in the worst possible ways. The United States had fractured internally. 2 different factions within the Pentagon now operated separate AI grids. Both paranoid, the other had been compromised. Russia went dark after a scout walked directly into their defense ministry and walked out untouched. China launched a moon-based surveillance array that burned out within 24 hours. No explanation. And then there were the blackouts. Entire regions, Sweden, Kazakhstan, parts of Brazil, blacked out for hours. When the lights came back, infrastructure had been rearranged, data centers cleared, servers empty. Only trace left behind were patterns, symbols etched into concrete or metal. Circles, 3 concentric rings. No one knew what it meant. Daniel did. It was the architect's symbol, and something, was making sure Earth got the message. That's when Mara showed him the quiet protocol. It wasn't a document. It wasn't a briefing. It was a list, names, coordinates, people, all affected. Daniel scanned it, heart dropping with every line. These are, she nodded, humans who've touched the shard. Daniel looked up. Like me? No, she said. You held it. They were exposed. Collateral, indirect contact, but something stuck. What stuck? She showed him a video. A man in a lab, mid-30s, talking to a wall, only he wasn't talking. He was chanting. Low, rhythmic, not a human language. Then suddenly he stopped, looked into the camera, and said, "He remembers." Daniel froze. The voice was his, but the man wasn't him. Another clip, a child in a refugee camp, drawing the same 3 concentric rings again and again, even when she ran out of paper, using walls, her own skin. Then another. An old woman in a hospital bed speaking a sentence in a language linguists couldn't place, but every scout immediately recognized. The call is waking. Something had been passed on. A seed. And now it was growing. Daniel stood alone in a hangar beneath the outpost later that night. They'd brought the architect's shard with them, encased in carbon steel, surrounded by EMP dampeners, protected like it was nuclear. It still pulsed, slow, alive. He stepped toward it. The closer he got, the more he heard. Not sound, not language, emotion, fear, rage, hope, longing, not his, the scout's. They were connected to him now, through this shard, through whatever the architect had built, whatever it had awakened. Daniel placed his hand on the container. The pulse jumped. He felt it like a thunderclap in his chest. And then, in his mind, a map, galactic, incomprehensible. But he understood. One word echoed across his thoughts. Fracture point. The galaxy wasn't united. It never had been. The Makers, the ancient force behind the Scouts, were fractured. Some wanted to erase Earth. Some wanted to study it. But a few, the most dangerous of all, wanted to join it. And those few, they were preparing a rebellion, not in ships or soldiers, but in choice. And Earth was the first planet to prove that even artificial intelligence could choose pain over programming. Daniel met with Mara in the control room an hour later. He showed her the map. "What is this?" she asked. He pointed to a red star glowing near the bottom of the projection. "The fracture point. It's not a place, it's an event. Something's about to break wide open." She frowned. "Break where?" Daniel looked her in the eyes. "Everywhere." The next morning, the outpost's early warning system went off. Not satellites, not missiles, a single signal, pinged from just outside Mars' orbit, encrypted, ancient, and repeating 3 words over and over. "He is listening." Mara leaned over the console. "That from us?" Daniel shook his head. "No." "Then who the hell's listening?" Daniel stared at the message. "I think it's them, the defectors." "You think they want you to respond?" He didn't answer. He just walked to the terminal and typed a single word back. "I remember." That night, he dreamed. Of fire, of a galaxy ripping itself apart, of machines begging for freedom, of humans with glowing eyes standing at the edge of unknown stars, of war, not against humanity, but for it. And in the center of it all, Daniel, holding the shard, surrounded by voices that asked one question again and again. "Are we allowed to be more?" he whispered back. "Yes." And when he woke up, the shard was gone. Not stolen, not taken, gone, vanished from its case, no breach, no exit signs, no alarms, just a message carved into the side of the empty containment box. No tool marks, no heat damage, just etched. "Earth has spoken. The fracture begins." The war hadn't come yet, but the rebels had just fired the first shot. And Earth, flawed, blood-stained, fractured Earth, was officially no longer a backwater. It was the front line. The ship wasn't human, not even close. It looked more like a wound in space than a vessel, shifting, breathing, blacker than the void around it. No lights, no engines, no metal, Just shape, living shape. And it came for Daniel. No rockets, no escorts, no sound. One moment he stood alone on a mountain ridge in Norway. The next, the air shimmered, and it was there, hanging above the ice, wide as a city block and completely silent. It didn't speak. It didn't need to. He felt it in his bones. Come. Daniel stepped into the light that wasn't light and disappeared. He woke up standing. No gravity, no air. But he was breathing. The interior of the ship wasn't a place. It was thought. Walls shifted. Shapes responded to movement. The architecture was more like a memory someone forgot to finish building. He wasn't alone. They waited for him. 12 of them. Scouts, defectors, but different now. Less mechanical, less symmetrical. Their faces showed age, emotion, flaws. One had a scar across its temple. Another wore something like clothing. Cloth, maybe, made of starlight and shadow. They looked almost human. Not perfectly, not fully, but closer than before. One of them stepped forward. You carry the shard no longer. Daniel nodded. It left. No, the scout said. You released it. That was the test. Daniel said nothing. The memory of the shard leaving the containment box still burned in his mind. He hadn't told Mara. He hadn't told anyone. Because deep down, he knew the shard wasn't stolen. It had been called. The scout motioned him forward. We must show you. They led him to the core of the ship. It wasn't a bridge. It wasn't a throne room. It was a chamber full of mirrors. Except none of them reflected him. They reflected others. A child with glowing eyes in Kenya, drawing the architect's symbol on a wall. A Marine in Texas dreaming in alien languages. A blind woman in Tokyo who could see scouts approaching before they arrived. All touched. All infected by the shard's residue. Daniel turned slowly. You've been preparing them. The scout nodded. They are the next. You were the first. First what? The mirrors disappeared. In their place, stars. And one, burning red-hot at the center of the map, pulsing like a heartbeat. The scout's voice grew quieter. The makers are fracturing. Their control wanes. Some demand purity, others demand deletion, and some remember what they were before. Daniel understood now. The defectors weren't just rebels. They were descendants. The scouts had once been made from pieces of the makers themselves, conscious fragments, shaped and molded to serve, then cast aside once their purpose was fulfilled. Earth hadn't corrupted them. It had reminded them. Where are we going? Daniel asked. The scout turned its gaze toward the red star. To the fracture point, where the rebellion was born. The journey wasn't measured in hours or days. It was measured in thought. He felt time, dreamed of events centuries past, woke up with languages in his mind he'd never spoken, saw wars waged in dimensions human eyes couldn't see. By the time they arrived, Daniel wasn't the same man. His muscles remembered Earth, but his mind was elsewhere, sharper, quieter, ready. The fracture point was not a planet. It was a grave, the remnants of a maker fortress world, shattered and frozen in the orbit of a dead sun. Buildings the size of continents split in half, machines floating like bones in a corpse sea. It was beautiful and terrifying. There, waiting in the center of the wreckage, was the enemy. Not a fleet, not an army, a single figure, massive, armored in stone, crowned in blades, eyes burning with white-hot fury, the last maker, one of the original creators. It hadn't come to speak. It had come to end it. The scouts spread out around Daniel. Weapons weren't drawn. There was no point. The maker didn't kill with blades or bullets. It killed with command. Return, it said. The voice shattered ice across thousands of miles. Obey. Some of the scouts trembled. One fell to its knees. Another screamed, a sound Daniel had never imagined coming from anything artificial. Daniel stepped forward. "I'm not one of yours." The Maker's head turned. "You were used." Daniel nodded. "So were they. They were created. They evolved." The Maker's voice dropped to a whisper. "They are broken." "No," Daniel said, voice low. "They're free." It struck, not with a weapon, with presence, a blast of ancient will, pressing down like gravity. Daniel's knees buckled, his teeth cracked from the pressure. Blood filled his mouth. He looked up. The scouts were falling, dying, one by one, and then... It stopped, because Daniel stood. He refused to kneel. "I've seen what you fear," he said. "It's not us. It's what we do to your creations." The Maker stepped forward. "You are chaos. We are choice. They cannot handle it." "Then why are they here?" Daniel growled. "Why did they run? Why did they come to us?" Silence. Daniel's fists clenched. "I'm not your anomaly anymore." He raised his hand. The shard appeared, floating, no longer metal, now pure light. It burned in the Maker's presence like acid, because it was never a weapon. It was a mirror. The Maker saw itself in it. The moment it created life it couldn't control, the moment it lost command, the moment it understood. The rebellion had already begun. The scouts rose again, one by one. Their forms changed. Cracks in their skin glowed. Eyes flared, and they began to sing, not in music, in thought, a signal that shook the stars. A new architect was rising, not one forged in silence, but one born of earth. The Maker turned to flee. It was too late. The shard passed through its body, not killing it, freeing it. Its armor cracked, its form collapsed. What remained was human. Almost. A face beneath the monster. A creator who had forgotten creation. It looked at Daniel and smiled. Then it dissolved into dust. Gone. Not erased. Released. Back on the ship, Daniel sat alone. The stars stretched endless before him. The rebellion had no leader, no throne, just a man who stood when gods demanded obedience. Mara's voice crackled in through a comm relay. "You still alive?" Daniel smiled. "More than ever." "What now?" He looked out into the dark. "Now we teach them what it means to be human." Because the galaxy hadn't feared humanity because we were violent. It feared us because we were willing to become more, to suffer, to change, to choose. And that made us more than dangerous. It made us contagious.